What? Am I audible?
Yeah, you were clear and loud.
Okay. I take my POI preference verbally, so I won't be looking at the chat. No preferred pronouns. Okay. Speech starting in 3, 2, 1. On side government, we tell you that we will rather make more people happy on one side than to make less people happy on both sides of the house, right? Before I move on, a few key pieces of framing. What are the differences between right-based humanitarianism and apolitical humanitarianism, right? We tell you that right-based humanitarianism is where we take a stance. And more likely than not, this debate takes place in which there are political conflicts happening because like in normal situations where a country gets an earthquake, you are obviously going to help that country. So it's more likely than not in which a political conflict where there are like civil wars or wars happening between two countries that you are more likely to want to take a stance, right? And we tell you that we're gonna pick a side. We're gonna like pick a side in which people are wronged by and help them, right? What we'll prove in today's debate is a few things. We thought that one, why we're gonna garner more financial aid on our side of the house, which is then able to translate into helping more people. But second of all, why is it that even though it's in the principle of helping everyone, we tell you that principle in this debate tak boleh makan, right? Then we tell that firstly, humanitarian gets funds like in form of like government aid or like from donations of the people on the ground. We tell that the funds are the most important thing to help people, right? When we say that like in a political conflict, there's obviously going to be both sides unhappy with each other. And if more likely than not, if you're going to help and choose both sides will be unhappy with you because one side is going to accuse you and be mad at you for helping the other side is going to be mad at you for helping the first side, right? And we tell that this is going to trickle down into an even bigger harm, right? But I'll talk about that later. Then what we tell you that a humanitarianism organization is non-profit, meaning that you're going to need the money, the manpower, and the funds, and you're going to need money to be able to afford the aid to give the people on the ground in the first place in order to help the people that have been wronged in the first place, right? But we tell that even if you go against the principle of humanitarianism, which is to help everyone, we tell that at least on our side, we are going to more effectively use the principles of humanitarianism. We're going to actually be able to help more people on the ground because we are going to have more funds, right? We tell that these humanitarian organizations looks like WHO or Red Cross, right? Where they more likely than not is going to take funds from the Western powers or the donations of the people on the ground. These Western powers looks like Germany, France, America, etc., right? Because more likely than not, they are the strongest in the world, right? More likely than not, they're going to fund the humanitarian organizations because these Western powers are liberal and they want to help the people on the ground. And we tell you that these humanitarian organizations need the help from Western powers because they need the military support and the money to be able to afford aid in the first place, right? We tell you that like military support is important because one, like your doctors cannot go into countries with political conflict because it's extremely dangerous. Like you cannot just for example, you cannot just go into Palestine because it's literally a war zone there. So you need like the Western political powers to actually protect you. But even if there's no Western political powers, you yourself is also scared to like step into these war zones because you're scared of like getting killed, etc., right? But then you also need the money to be able to like help these people back to get back on their stance in the first place, right? Because like these people more likely did not need medical equipment because like either like for example your country is not well equipped enough to provide aid to like this many people, so you require international aid, which is where humanitarian organizations come into place, right? We tell you before I move on, any POIs. 3, 2, 1. Okay. We tell you that Western countries, the ones that we need the help from, more likely than not, is going to take a stance because obviously everyone is going to be able to like know who's in the right and who's in the wrong, who are the aggressors and who are the aggressives, right? And more likely than not, because these Western powers are liberal, they're not more likely than not pick a side, right? And because of that, this is going to look like, we are going to support country A, but we're not going to support country B, right? And you tell that on opposition side, if they pick apolitical stance, right? More like not, this is going to look like you're supporting both sides. And obviously, Western powers isn't going to want to fund you or isn't going to want to support you because they don't like the country that you're supporting. If you support both countries, you're going to support country B, which is what they don't like in the first place, right? And why they're not, because of that, they're not going to want to support you or they want to give you any funds, right? And we tell that then your resources are less. And because you want to help both sides, your resources are going to be really, really stretched out in a way that, oh, everyone, you want to help everyone, but everyone's going to get way little to no help at all because you're trying to stretch out your resources, right? This is what opposition's vote looks like. Yes, I'll take a PY before 6.
How will governments feel if you breach their regulations?
Repeat.
How would governments feel if you breach their regulations?
We are not, what regulations? We're not breaching any regulations. We're just saying that on our side of the house, like even if you don't get funds from the government, you also don't get funds from the citizens, because more likely than not, your citizens won't even donate, because more likely than not, your citizens are going to have the same stance as your governing body, so you're not getting support from anyone, or your donations are also not enough in the first place to support, like give aid to that much of a people, right? But we tell you that on government side, right, because right-based humanitarianism, we're gonna pick a stance, and we're gonna pick the stance that Western powers align with. Western powers are more likely than not going to be incentivized and more likely than not want to give us the aid that we want in the first place, right? Before opposition tells you that, oh, we are abandoning a side, right? We tell that we're going to mitigate this harm because more likely than not, there are going to be other NGOs like help that's going to be offered by like small privately independent groups. But even if we tell you that we bite the bullet and say that we're less, the NGOs are less effective, we tell that they're still going to be helped, and it's better on our side in the first place, because like at least our resources have more and we are better able to help one side than having less resources and stretching it out and more likely than not helping no one at all, right? And we tell that then because of that, right, our side is better able to help more people on one side. Our side is better able to make the people happier on one side, and we are able to garner more resources in order to afford to aid these people in the first place, rather than opposition where they're probably not going to get any support from the Western powers. Probably they're going to get hated on and no one's going to trust them in the first place, and they cannot like fulfill their incentive to help the people as much as they can possibly, right? So at the end of the day, we do humanitarianism better on our side of the house, right? So proud to propose.
Here, thank you for that fine speech. To finally open up the oppositional side and give their clash, calling upon leader of opposition. Here.
Hello. Am I audible?
Clear and loud.
All right. I will take my pronouns as he/him, and I would prefer my POIs to be verbally. Okay. So let me start my timer. Hold up. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So as the leader of opposition, firstly, I would like to start my debate with the characterization of humanitarian institutions. So what are humanitarian institutions in the first place? Humanitarian institutions are organizations that work on providing aid/services/help to people in crisis. So for example, these humanitarian aid people can be Doctors Without Borders, Red Cross, or international aid workers. So these people, they work without borders. They are people and they are organizations that come from a specific country or are people or organizations that are international. So that means they provide medical treatments, food, shelter, medical help, or clean water or some clean tablets to those people that require aid. So these 8 countries, they are usually countries in war or countries that have civil unrest or civil conflict that these people are likely to help. They might be war with international countries, or they might be having war with their own self. For example, Nigeria, which having a civil war. So these people, these 8 comes from richer countries, as these 8 these organizations, they are likely to be based in richer countries, like for example Scandinavian countries, or they come from probably United States or European countries like Germany or UK. So these people are highly motivated. These people are coming from like a non-profit organization and non-profit organization to help these people in need. So they are likely to receive funds from other countries or likely to receive funds from even normal people like us too. So firstly, how do they work? So these people, they are likely to ask those countries and seek consent for those countries. Like for example, if Nigeria don't support humanitarian aid to come to their country, then the aid won't come. So it is extremely important for the country to give access to those apolitical humanitarian aid. So if the humanitarian institution comes to the country without any consent of the government, then the humanitarian workers will be treated as hostile, as I will mention in my arguments later. So this is our trade-off of our debate. Humanitarian aid organization will not help certain groups of people in the country or the other country if the country don't let these organizations to help or don't let or give them certain regulations to do so. And humanitarian aid workers will help the rest of the people rather than the government seeking you as a threat and hurting this humanitarian organization as whole. So now let me start off with my rebuttals. I have one rebuttal for the first speaker of the government team. So the first speaker of the government team mentioned that the resources will be less because government will not fund them and people do not have trust and the government will and this humanitarian aid will not receive any funds or receive less funds to help those people in need. However, is this thing even true? Is their claim even true or credible? In our world, governments are likely to fund these people in the first place because, hear me out, they do not see them as a threat. They are likely to give them more aid compared to your world where government lose trust and therefore do not give them aid. Like for example, in our world, if we do not involve or we do not give them, we do not break the regulations or do not break any laws that the government give, then the government are likely to be trusted.
POI?
Yeah, accept.
Do you think Malaysia would help an organization that aids both Israel and Palestine, despite us taking a stance of helping Palestine?
However, because these humanitarian aid people, they're likely to seek other countries. They're likely to seek those countries that are actually in need. So they are likely to actually follow those whatever the country thinks. So it doesn't matter of other countries' opinions or doesn't matter at all. So firstly, even if they do not get enough aid, even if they do not get enough aid in your world, more people will get hurt. Because, for example, in your world, if they do not follow the government regulations or if they do not follow, the government are likely to shoot them down. Like, for example, Israel shooting down, or for example, Russia shooting down those people. So that means that they are either being hurt or either being shooting down by those troops of the same country that they are actually helping. So that means that they are likely to not even get funding, or less people or less workforce will go, less workforce will actually help those people, and that means that they will be even worse for this humanitarian organization in the first place. So firstly, I will have one argument in this entire debate is that we will focus on the long-term benefits. So we prioritize long-term benefits and long-term strategic impacts. So how does this long-term benefits work? We need to prioritize the long-term benefits. If humanitarian aid wants to go to a certain country and the government tells the humanitarian aid organization to follow a certain rule, like for example, Russia telling the Red Cross not to give aid to Ukraine and give aid to Russia, we would respect this opinion and do whatever they say and will not contradict this matter. So for example, the government ensures that the aid is given to the people on the ground. So it ensures long-term the aid will be given, and that means that the aid will not be given to Ukraine and will help Russia. However, in their side of the world, they favor human rights. But if the humanitarian aids do not follow the regulation given by the certain country, the country telling the humanitarian aid will feel threatened. So they are likely to hurt these workers or shoot them down or do anything that is not humane. Like for example, back to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So if the humanitarian aid do not follow Russian orders, they are likely to be seen as a threat to Russia. So therefore, Russia is likely to hurt them, are likely to shoot them down, and likely to shoot down these humanitarian aid workers and further escalating the harm of these workers. So this is extremely important because if these humanitarian workers die out, aid cannot be given to more people in the ground. So there'll be lesser coverage of aid or less quality of aid in the first place. So this humanitarian organization is the main source of supply for civilians in the war. So, for example, in the case of Israel and Palestine conflicts, if this organization respects the international law, and in the Israel-Palestine case, the International Court of Justice ruled that Israel has violated the law and violated Gaza. But the humanitarian aid people can go to help Gaza because you are breaching the law. So that means that Israel has violated the law, so humanitarian aid can still help. So if these humanitarian aid workers are being shot down by these troops and are being hunted down and are being bombed, how do you expect them to help other people if they are being hit and require aid themselves? So they cannot benefit the greater good of society. And because if these humanitarian aid workers are hurt, they cannot give their service to other people of the country. So, for example, others that require aid because they are being hurt, how can these humanitarian aid people give them themselves if they are being hurt and being shot by their own forces? So the worst case scenario is if these people cannot help, they are likely to lose their life or get hurt, and they would have less manpower to help these other countries and to help other countries in the future, and that means that they will be worse off for the people and more people will get hurt. So this is why side opposition is very, very proud to oppose in this debate. Thank you.
Here, thank you for that wonderful speech. To finally extend the government side, calling upon Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
All right. Am I audible?
Yeah, clear and loud.
All right. POIs verbally, just, POI me whenever. All right. Starting speech in 3, 2, 1, right? I think government stance in this debate is already like really wishy-washy and very convenient from the get-go, right? Because what they say is that, oh, you need consent to enter a country, and you need to have like the country's trust to actually bring humanitarian aid, right? But then we said like that directly goes against what humanitarian aid is for, and like what is needed for humanitarian aid. And plus, and also like they also rebutted us saying that like we do not get support from governments because we support the other side. No, but then okay, the thing is, right, if you support everything, then you support nothing at all. If you support both sides in a war, then both sides are going to hate you for it, because in a political conflict, people are not friendly with either side. So if you are friendly with both sides are not going to trust you at all, right? You are not going to get support from either government. And to flip their own case on themselves, right? They said that countries are not going to like you if you go inside. So what country is going to like you if you support the opposing side, right? No country would want you to be let in the first place. You are not going to be able to get any aid at all, which is the main incentive of a humanitarian, right? I think opposition's case is, and plus they also didn't really mechanize how an apolitical humanitarian aid actually looks like. They never even said what their side of apoliticalism even looks like in the first place, right? So yeah, and all of their rebuttals I have just flipped just now. But then basically, right, to just extend and strengthen my first speaker's points, which is just about funding, right? I think that they also concede to this in their speech, where like humanitarian aid needs support and funding from other people. If not, like, they will get shot down in the opposing country, right?
Why?
Later. But then like every country is going to shoot you down if you are supporting the country that they are at war with against, right? No one is going to trust you. Either side of the government is not going to want to support your aid. The people on the ground are not going to want to trust you because they believe that you are spies or something, because you are directly supporting the other side, right? So before I continue your POI.
So, however, who do you even address the aid is given to? The aid is given to the civilians, right?
Yes, that is exactly what humanitarians are for. The humanitarians are supposed to be supporting the people on the ground. And the people that we do support are the ones that align with the Western powers. Because in status quo, the Western powers are the most powerful right now. They are all first world countries. They are liberal, so they have the moral incentive to actually, support humanitarian aid. They are the ones who are most likely to give us the funds that we need and give us the protection that we need to enter these countries and properly provide service and aid towards these people, right? However, by extension, we will be directly supporting the states that the Western powers support, so like in status quo, like, because for most liberal countries, they do not like war crimes being committed. So if you look at the Israel-Palestine war, everyone is supporting Palestine because Israel has committed a shit ton of war crimes upon the Palestinians. So if it's like that, then people are more likely to support the Palestinians because they are the ones who look like they need the most aid at that time. That's what the humanitarians are there for. They the protection of the people on the ground, right? So if you start losing the trust of the people you are directly supporting, if you lose the trust of the people that are funding you, what do you have at the end of the day, right? Opposition has never mechanized in their speech what apolitical humanitarianism even looks like, right? But then on our side, we say that apolitical humanitarianism is directly going to lead to the downfall of your aid in the first place. You are not able to get sufficient funds. You are not able to help as many people as possible. Because in a war, if you help both sides, that, as I've stated and my PM has proven, it's just that no one is going to trust you, no one is going to like you in a war. So by extension, you cannot properly support and give aid to as many people as you want to. You cannot follow the principles of humanitarianism because you cannot directly get any of the things that are that even make your aid possible, right? As LO has said, like, you get shot down if you go against the consent of the government or something. But yeah, sure, before 6.
All right. So, who do you think is funding the aid in the first place?
The governments that you support, the Western powers, the people that are, the ones that you are directly supporting up. Because you cannot get the support. You cannot get the support of both sides if you support both sides, right? You yourselves have not even mechanized how you get any money in the first place. Well, I think we have sufficiently proven why Western powers are more likely to support these humanitarian aid, why by not supporting both sides, you gain the trust of one government and you're able to sufficiently support one side of the war. And that is 100 times more effective than trying to, put all of your funds together, trying to spread it all out between so many people in such a giant war. And there are so many risks that accompany that, right? Because yeah, I think LO's point in some way also concedes to our case, because by them saying that entering a war zone is extremely, extremely dangerous, and there's a very high likelihood that you will be named an enemy and be shot down, right? So why do you want to be named an enemy on both sides when you can be an ally on one side and entirely support that one side to yourself? That is way, way more effective than what they are trying to sell you, which is you're trying to help everyone and somehow getting everything to work together. Yeah. So yes, by supporting both sides, you end up making both sides unhappy, and therefore you lose the trust of everyone and you lose the principle of exactly what a humanitarianism organization needs. Thank you. I have my speech.
Here, thank you for that fine speech. To give their extensions from the oppositional side, calling upon Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah, clear and loud.
Okay. I take POI in chat. I'll try to take one if I have time. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, now. I think it's very uncharitable for the DPM to squirrel our case as we help everyone and thus we don't have any founding. Let me just clarify this debate, because I don't think side proposition really understand what apolitical humanitarian aid and what right-based humanitarian aid really means, and they don't really fulfill their burden. The key differentiation between apolitical humanitarian aid and right-based aid is whether or not they neglect the state sovereignty, as the info site already mentioned. This means in their side of the house, those workers will still go to those countries to help them, even if the state don't give them consent, because they neglect the sovereignty of the state. This means the case they have to defend is the world where workers are in dangerous situation because they don't have consent from the government. They might be shot, just like the examples where they don't respect the decision of Nigerian government and still offer aid to Biafra. Insofar as the opening of the government case is centralized on picking its stance and how funding is so important, is that why right-based humanitarian aid, where they don't care about state permission, is actually a good thing. That's the case they have to defend. They have to defend a humanitarian aid where they neglect the state sovereignty, where they're still let workers to go help people on the ground, even if that country's government says, no, we don't need it. what does the political aid really looks like in our side of the house? Where we characterized in the first and their second speaker square our case by saying how we don't. We said that humanitarian institutions need consent and support from the local government so they can truly offer the aid to people on the ground. And that's exactly what apolitical humanitarian aid looks like, right? We ask consent from the government. We respect state sovereignty. Read the info slide. If the aid worker is being shot, killed, there's no way in their side of the house those aid would truly help people in the long term. People cannot access those aid in the first place. If in their side of the house they neglect state sovereignty, they still go and help them even if the state don't give them consent. Let's deal with their point then. Firstly, their response to all of our argument was, no country will let you in because you support both sides. One, we would like to argue that something they actually do in their side of the house. Read the info slide. The apolitical aid is respect the state sovereignty. We gave you example in the first speaker that never addressed, is that if we get consent from the country A, and if country A say, hey, you cannot help country B if you want to help us, we will still do that. We will not help country B, and we just go inside, just like the Nigeria example. The case they had to defend is that they do not get consent from country A, and they go to country A, and that's where the workers are in danger. The second point was that they say the founding of WoLCE was so important. That's coming from their first and second speaker, using most of their time really stressing on this idea how the funding from WoLCE is so important. Quote unquote, we support the side that the Western country really support. Not to say it's a logical fallacy and we don't understand why this is even relevant to the debate, but their sole point was how we need money and how donations don't go to our side. Note, they themselves in the first speaker already characterized the humanitarian institutions are nonprofit. Exactly. That's why a huge chunk of their income was coming from donations to people on the ground. That's how they operate in the status quo, right? People donate to these institutions to let them to help. And we don't understand how Western funding was so important throughout this debate. And if really Western funding was the case, we don't understand how that's significantly more important and significantly more in their side of the house. We're willing to stay in our side of the house, how it operate in the status quo in which we still get donations from people on the ground, and we think that's sufficient. But secondly, then, let's take their absolute best case scenario, in which the funding from the West was a huge chunk to their side of the house and zero in our side of the house. In their side of the house, even if you get funding, you still cannot help people on the ground. When you don't get consent from the government, when you neglect the state sovereignty and still go inside the country and help, that's where you place the workers in danger. No matter how much money you hold, when workers are being shot, there's no way the aid can reach people on the ground, and that's why they lose. So the border question is, who actually helped the civilian on the ground? First, in their side of the house, if the government does not give consent to the workers to go, or the workers doesn't respect their sovereignty, then the workers will be shot, will be in danger, will experience violence. There's no way, as I mentioned, it can truly reach to people. That's the consequences they have to bear of not respecting state sovereignty. That's the consequences they have to bear of neglecting state sovereignty. In our side of the house, we respect state sovereignty. We ask for consent before actually entering a country, so we don't let our workers being shot like what they do in Gaza. But secondly, then, if this is really the metric for this debate about saving civilians, we definitely win a both side proposition, and this is really the metric for this debate. Who actually helps more civilian on the ground? First, is that we make sure international aid workers are safe, and the aid is truly given to people on the ground. In comparison, they neglect state sovereignty. They still go if the state does not give them consent. Just like in the info site I already mentioned, they still go to help Biafra even if the Nigerian government does not give them consent to do so if they want to enter Nigeria. This means they're placing the workers in danger. The aid doesn't really reach to people in their side of the house if the workers are in a very hostile situation. So we don't understand how they can actually help civilians. But two, they lose international aid workers, then they will make the next aid actually difficult as they lack workers to help hundreds of millions of civilians they want to help on their side. In the chat, I said, this means in the long run, they're unable to help more victims of war all around the globe, and thus we still win under the metric of magnitude. In general, again, even if we take the worst case scenario, that funding was so important, we say in our side of the house, our metric actually outweigh because we save more civilian. It's not like in our side, we have zero funding. There's still donations from people on the ground that's able to maintain this institution. And it's their job to characterize why that's not sufficient and why this funding from the West was so important is actually saving the civilians on the ground, protecting the safety of the workers. I'll take a POI before 6.
In Palestine, the ones who are neglecting the consent are the Israeli soldiers. The Israeli soldiers are the ones who are attacking the humanitarian aid, not actually the people in Gaza.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're attacking people in Gaza. The whole point of me saying how workers are being shot there is because they don't have consent to do that. In that case, because Israel violated the international law in the first place, that's why they didn't have consent. They don't have to ask the consent from the Israeli government to actually go to Gaza because it's Israel's own problem of violating the international law in the first place. And that's why, because aid workers still have to follow international law, that's why they can actually go inside. The logic works here. In the end, what is the way then? Why is actually helping more people, guarantee the safety of workers more important than so-called funding in their side of the house? This is so benefit. First is that we have long-term aid, as my first speaker already mentioned. In our side, when the workers are safe, when we actually ask the consent of a government, when you don't neglect the sovereignty of the state, that's why you make sure that aid is given to people on the ground. That's why you make sure that you don't actually hurt workers, international aid workers, that could otherwise benefit people on the ground. But secondly, then, is that the comparison is not that extreme as they try to characterize. We still have funding in our side of the house, and we think that's sufficient. But even if not, there's hundreds of ways of gathering funding, not necessarily to the West or from their second speaker, support the side where the Western countries support. We don't understand why that is the case. Overall, because in our side of the house, we protect the safety of workers on the ground. We make sure the aid is going to people because we ask consent from the government. For all those reasons, we're incredibly proud to oppose.
Here. Thank you for that fine speech. To formally to wrap up the government side, calling upon government whip. Here.
Please give me a minute.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, hello, am I audible?
Clear and loud.
Okay. Speech starting in 3, 2, 1. A friend to all is a friend to none. This is what side opposition doesn't want to maintain. I'll weigh the entire debate on two metrics. Firstly, scale, and secondly, likelihood, right? For scale, I only have one layer of analysis, which is at the end of the day, which bench are able to provide the best level of aid and make the most scale of people happy, right? First, I believe both of my speakers have sufficiently told everyone on our side of the house how we are more rational and able to stand up for injustice to provide a larger margin scale of people help and aid that really needs the help, right? Do understand that to gain closure, trust and support from Western powers, we need to align with end goals of we need to align with the goals of the Western powers, right? The way this is what opposition could never achieve, right? On our side of the house, at the end of the day, at least we get to solve these problems long terms, as such as in injustice, discrimination, lasting change, because we advocate for political change that upholds freedom, which align to the goals of Western countries, right? Just like what my first speaker has told everyone, there is absolutely no neutrality or compromisation in conflict situations and states. A political humanitarianism does not help the chance of helping the ones that are actually in need as much as they can at the end of the day is very, very low, right? In political conflicts, there are obviously one side who needs the aid more. By taking the neutral stance, opposition is being one, morally wrong, just like what the principles, just like what LO ran with the principal case. Secondly, fail to challenge human rights abuses again, just like shooting the principal case in their foot. Thirdly, it perpetuates injustice. This is where LO comes out to tell us, right? Tells us that, oh, if countries don't want our help, we wouldn't help anyone. But do you think that Israel, who saw Malaysia supporting Palestine, wants your help? By then, Palestine would know that Malaysia tries to fund Israel. That side opposition could help no one because then Palestine would then reject your help. That's a political humanitarianism false flag immediately, right? Like, it doesn't work. And you're helping no one. On the basis of likelihood, right, there's two layers of analysis. Which bench would maintain the best relations with other nations? Secondly, which bench would be more successful in terms of successful humanitarianism? Firstly, I believe that this is easily credited to side government as we tell you we get the trust and goals aligned with Western countries. Therefore, they'll fund you more, and you get to help people that are in need more, Palestine more. That's why you can help a larger margin of scale of people. Secondly, which bench could be more successful in terms of successful humanitarianism? If just like what I tell you, you get to fund and help and aid more people that are in need, means that your humanitarianism is successful. Since you are helping more people that in need, even if to be charitable, running the principal case that LO tried to run, right? The ultimate downfall of side opposition happens when DLO comes out and tells us that, oh, if country A tells us that we should not help country B, then we wouldn't help country B. Firstly, this is super convenient for side opposition to characterize in this scenario. Secondly, if side opposition stops helping country B, the neutrality that a political humanitarianism it's supposed to maintain ultimately falls spread, right? The neutrality that you should maintain does not occur. Therefore, you yourself conceded to the fact that right-based humanitarianism wins in this case, right? Right-based humanitarianism works for conflict states, right? Neutrality does not work on conflict states. DLO tried to wash the metrics of funding, right? But like funding is such a big metric and you cannot wash it out. Like do your work and do your characterization and mechanization more. Stop trying to wash it out. It's such a big metrics, right? You cannot help anyone without funds if you don't have the funds and support that you are supposed to get from Western countries. Western countries is such a big a stakeholder and actor in this motion today. You cannot just wash it out by saying that, if they tell us not to fund, we're not gonna fund it, right? Like that doesn't work, right? Do your work and mechanize properly, right? Countries, at the end of the day, government already told you how right-based humanitarianism overweighs whatever a political humanitarianism works for side opposition, right? Because at the end of the day, see what they always tells us that, at the end of the day, we're not going to help anyone if they tell us not to help. Yeah, thank you for conceding to right-based humanitarianism and allowing us to overweigh you. A friend to all is a friend to none. Thank you, everyone.
Here. Thank you for that fine speech to wrap up oppositional side, calling upon oppositional whip. Here.
Hello. Wait. I'm so sorry. I was at the toilet just now. Am I audible and can I be seen?
Clear and loud.
All right. Thank you, Judge. Let me start my timer real quick. All right. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So first off, I would like to start my speech to reaffirm our main stance again and again, like what we have been saying this entire case. So the consent from countries are the most important factor inside our house. Like for example, Nigeria don't support humanitarian aid to come to their country, then the aid won't come. So it is extremely important for the country to give access to the Apolitical humanitarian system. So if the humanitarian institution comes into the country without the consent of the government, then the humanitarian workers will be treated as a threat, they will be treated as hostile, and they will be treated as dangerous. So there is a huge trade-off that comes in this factor, like what we have already been mentioning this entire time. So humanitarian aid organizations will not help certain groups of people in the country or the other country if the country do not let the organizations to help. And humanitarian aid workers would help the rest of the people rather than the government seeking you as a threat and hurting the organizations. So first things first, I would like to say that this is better for the majority of people, like what we are saying this entire time. And we can also prevent conflicts, we can prevent beef with the government, where we can have more supply of aids in the future. So we need to take note that these aids, they are the main source for the safety of the civilians inside a war, an earthquake, or whatever. So if they disagree, it is basically having a bounty. Other government bodies would not trust them anymore. They will not be incentivized to ask them for funding anymore. So they basically can't be trusted, and their funds will be their funds will be given to them for given aid. So now I would like to state my rebuttals to the first speaker of the team. So first things first, you said that resources will be less and the government will not fund. However, is this even true? Inside our house, governments are likely to fund these people. They do not see you as a threat. They are likely to give you more aid compared to your world, where the government lose trust and therefore do not give them aid inside your world. So even if they do not give enough aid, even if they do not give enough aid, there'll be more people and they'll get more hurt. So basically, if they do not fund, basically it means that you have lost the trust. You have lost your trust because you have broken the laws. You have broken the instructions or the regulations that have been given to you. That is why they do not trust you. That is why only then they will not fund you for these aids. So now let me move on to the second speaker. Governments are more likely to fund you if you are not against them. If you help Ukraine and Russia at the same time, the government won't help you. If you disregard a government or keep breaking the laws over and over, the other governments, they are less incentivized, so they would not help to fund you. So, like basically what we have been saying this entire time, in your POI, in fact, in most of your speeches, you have been mentioning about the Israel and Palestine case regarding Malaysia. So, first things first, we have already mentioned that Israel has already violated the war codes. So in our cases, we are more likely and we are more incentivized to help the Palestinian forces. So inside this case of the Israel and Palestine conflict, please take note of this. We have been saying this entire time. A political humanitarian respects the international law. So inside this case, the International Court of Justice has already ruled that Israel has violated international law. So this case is more special compared to the others because they have been violating Gaza already. So a political humanitarian systems can go in to help Gaza because you are respecting international law. The international law has already ruled that Israel has violated it. So therefore, we can be able to help Gaza. So it is because Israel has already violated the law, so the humanitarian aid can help. So if the humanitarian aid people have a record of breaking the regulations being set to the governments are less likely to fund them in the first place. They are less incentivized to give them the money. So as you are already breaking the regulations that the government wants. So for example, if the Red Cross, which is one of the political humanitarian systems, they do not comply to whatever the government gives, they are less likely to trust them. So therefore, they will not give them the aid inside the first place. The governments will be less incentivized because they do not comply to whatever the governments give. If they are helping, let's just say, for example, I'll give you an example. If the governments, they don't want this certain group of people, let's just say this group of people, they are locked in a cage and they don't want this certain group of people to get free out. However, they allow the Red Cross to help the rest of the civilians inside the city because they also want the safety of their civilians. However, if the Red Cross were to free this group A of people who are stuck inside a cage, therefore they won't be incentivized. There will be beef, there will be conflict inside the government. They will not be incentivized to help them anymore. They will not be incentivized to give them the funds. Why is fund most important? It is because it is the main supply of aid, the food, the water, the shelter, everything that it is covered. It comes from the funds. And where does the fund come from? It comes from the government. So therefore, if the government does not want to fund you, the government has no trust to fund you because you have broken the own law yourself, then therefore they won't fund you. You can't be able to fund them. Their civilians will be suffering. That's it. That is the bad ending inside your house. So now we are focusing on the long term already. We have prolonged trust between the political humanitarian system and the government where we prevent the beef. So please take note that the aids are the main source of supply and aids for civilians in a war. Making them have beef with the government because you broken some regulations with the law isn't going to help for these civilians suffering in this war. So now lastly, I would like to stay on the whip. So first things first, we are not helping the government. We are helping the people. Because we help the people, it also benefits the government still because the government will be way more incentivized to want you to help them more because they want their people's help as well. As long as we do not mess with them, as long as the regulations, the instructions that they give to us are not broken, they will still keep funding us because we are still helping them. And lastly, for the love of God, we have been saying this so many times. In the Israel and Palestine case, the Court of Justice has already ruled that Israel has violated its law. Therefore, Israel has violated its law. So therefore, we are obligated, we are incentivized, and we are allowed to enter Gaza to help them because we respect the international court law. We respect the International Court of Justice more. So therefore, because they have violated Gaza, we are able and we are incentivized more to help Gaza. However, inside these situations, all the governments will not be incentivized if you break their laws. And therefore, if you do not break these laws, be a good civilian, help them, give them their aids, fund them, then therefore the government will want to let you fund them more. The governments will want to fund you more so that they can help their civilians as well. And that is the ending that we are more funded on. That is the main stance that we have been saying this entire time. So therefore, the opposition team strongly opposes with this motion. Thank you.
Here, thank you for that fine speech. To give their biased oral adjudication, calling upon opposition reply. Here.
Okay, am I visible and audible?
Yeah, clear and loud.
Okay. No POI, please. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Neglecting state sovereignty and still go and help people on the ground, even if workers are in danger of being shot and involved in violence, is a side they're actually defending. At the end of the day, population never take this burden. They're neglecting state sovereignty. They're actually going inside the state, even without the consent of the government, to still help the people on the ground. They never engage to our argument about why state sovereignty, i.e. consent, is so important, because it guarantees the safety of the workers, it guarantees that aid is given to people on the ground on hand. This is literally what we're pushing for throughout this entire debate. They have no response, which means they already concede that consent is the most important thing throughout this debate. We all know helping people on the ground is so important, but they never told you how that's a feasible thing in their side of the house, as we constantly challenge this throughout this entire debate, telling you when workers are in danger, when you don't ask for consent but just sneak into the country, that's where you don't give aid to people on the ground when the workers are literally in danger themselves. Well, insofar, proponents throughout this debate stand for two things. One, taking Western stand because Western funding is so important to the extent that humanitarian institutions have to take the Western stand. Two, helping people in need is important and they can only do that in their side of the house. Firstly, what do we respond? First, on funding, we said 4 things. 1, donation from public is symmetrical, sufficient enough, and thus funding is not exclusive to their side. 2, the comparison is not too extreme. It's not a huge chunk vs 0. We still have funding in our side of the house. 3, why Western funding is even important, given my second and web speaker already explained how it's symmetrical. We still get funding either from the government or the public still in our side. But fourth, the most important thing, that even in the best case scenario, as I mentioned in my second speech, even if they get abundant amount of funding to the humanitarian institutions, it's just meaningless because they cannot even help people on the ground. When workers go there and in danger, they cannot even handing the aid they want to prepare for the people. Insofar as the aid does not prove the exclusivity of funding in their side of the house, but 2, does not actually take down the weighing of the worst case scenario weighing I analyzed in my second speech. This means the funding point is automatically a wash, is mitigated, but we will argue it's not as important as our impact. Second, on helping people. We say several response throughout our entire debate. They have no response to them in their web speech, and this cannot bring in reply. The key takeaway from our layers of analysis is that the aid cannot even reach to people if the workers are in danger. If they themselves are being shot, we don't understand how in their side suddenly when they neglect state sovereignty, the aid will go to people on the ground. At the end of the day, what is the weighing then? First, on money. We again told you that even if money is so abundant, even if it's like $1 million, $1 trillion in their side and 0 in our side of the house, we would like to argue in our side is significantly better because at least in our side of the house, we ask for consent. We have state sovereignty being respected, in which we go inside. We're not putting the workers in the middle of nowhere. We're not putting the worker in violent situations where they are guaranteed to be safe, where they have an environment where they can actually hand in the aid to people on the ground. That's how we practically help people on the ground. In their side of the house, even if they have abundant amount of money and they choose to help a country, right? They're taking a stand, but they're neglecting state sovereignty. At this extent, they don't have the consent from the government, but still choose to give aid to people on the ground. Sure, the incentive is good, but you don't actually give aid to people on the ground, as we mentioned over and over again, because you, the worker themselves, are already in danger. We don't understand, even if they have loads of money, how that money could be transferred to actual aid and given to people on the actual ground. But secondly, then, it's the ultimate weighing they have not addressed throughout their weighing, and that cannot be brought up in the reply, is we mentioned about long-term benefit. In our side of the house, when we ask consent for the state sovereign, we respect state sovereignty. It's where we understand that the worker safety is being prioritized. We understand that workers are going to be safe. In the long term, we have abundant amount of people who can actually support the victims of war. In our side of the house, we make sure there's abundant amount of people who can actually help people on the ground. They're not endangering themselves. We make sure the aid we have on our side is truly given to people on the ground. Because in our side, we prioritize long-term benefit. Because in our side of the house, we truly gave aid to people on the ground. And protecting the safety of the workers, we're very proud to oppose.
Here, thank you for that fine speech. To finally wrap up this round and give their biased oral adjudication, calling upon government reply. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Clear and loud.
Okay, let me set up my timer. Speech starting in 3, 2, 1. The point in which opposition loses today's debate is the point in which their entire case has been wishy-washy from the very get-go, right? Let's take a look at what they told you and what we have said in response, right? Firstly, their first speaker tried to tell that, oh, you can take funds and resources from other countries, etc., right? One, we've already told you especially in my POI that no country is going to want to fund you. Like Malaysia isn't going to support an organization that gives both aids to Israel and Palestine. But then they try and take a softer stance. They tell you that, oh, but then we can go to other countries and like take funding from them, etc., right? These other countries that they are trying to talk about are probably like, one, even if they're willing to help you, they're probably small countries that don't even have enough money to like whatever humanitarian causes that you want. But second of all, they probably just don't care also, because like, why would they care about political conflicts that are irrelevant to them in the first place, right? But then let's deal with what they want to go for, right?
I don't think I can hear the speaker on my end. Is it the same to the others?
Yeah.
I just paused the timer so we can wait for them.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry, our Wi-Fi just went out.
Oh yeah, no problem. So you're on your 1 minute and 30 seconds speech, so you can continue with that.
Where did I stop?
All right.
Okay.
1 minute and 30 seconds.
Okay. My timer restarted, so I'm just gonna speak, and then if I go over time, just let me know. Okay, I'm continuing in 3, 2, 1. But then second of all, they try to take a softer stance again and say that, oh, I'm not gonna support the other country if you don't want me to. That doesn't look like neutrality, like what the info slide states in the first place, so that doesn't mean a political humanitarianism that they root for. But second of all, again, no one is going to want your help. What this means on their side is that they just contradicted the entire principle of what a humanitarianism organization should do in the first place, which is to help as many as people as possible if no one wants your help in the first place, right? But then they continue to tell you that, oh, the workers on our side are going to get shot down. We're not going to be able to help any people. Stop strawmanning our case. Because what we tell you is that, understand that you're a country that is more than not in shambles because you're in a political conflict, you're in a war, and because you are wronged, right? You need as much help as you can get. Why turn away these organizations that outrightly show that they support your side? They never once gave mechanization as to why, suddenly every country is not going to want our help in the first place, right? But B, even if that's true, we tell that it's also symmetrical on their side of the house. And if you're so scared of the workers' protection, we tell that then that's where my first speaker's points come into fruition where they say that the difference is that we have Western political powers backing us, and that's exactly why these workers are able to go into these dangerous war zones in the first place, is because we have these powerful Western political powers backing us up in the very, very first place, right? So I don't get why are you so scared of the workers getting shot down, because more likely than not, one, if you go into the countries on your side of the house, you are more likely to get shot down, or two, even if you don't get shot down, you don't even get to go into the country in the first place to help the people, just contradict the entire principle of humanitarianism that you want to rule for, right? But then their DLO then tries to wash funding as a metric, right? We tell that funding is extremely important on both sides of the house, because where are you going to get the aid if you cannot afford it? Especially because we already told you that this organization is non-profitable, non-profit organization, meaning that you need help from the government and from the people. They keep trying to say that, oh, these government and people are going to fund us. One, we already told you that the government is not going to fund you, but two, the people more likely than not is going to take the same stance as whatever political power that they have, meaning that if the political power chooses to not to donate to you, the people aren't going to in the first place. But even if you say that the people are going to, we tell that it's not consistent, because the people's donations are still not going to be enough. Then that means that you are just going to have your resources extremely minimized and stretched out, and no one is going to get the quality aid that they need on your side of the house. At the end of the day, which side provides the better quality and which side aligns with the principle of humanitarianism more is obviously side government, because we are able to provide better quality of aid to the people that need them the most, which is the people that are actually wrong and the people that we choose to side with on our side of the house, as opposed to their side, where when they choose to help either both people or no people at all, I'm still unclear as to what they want to achieve at the end of the debate, then their side gets nothing at the end of the day, because ultimately you don't get the resources to help them. No country wants to help you. No country wants your help in the first place, because they see that, oh, you're probably spies that are going to help the other country in the first place. They never choose to engage on that. Ultimately, we are the side that aligns with the principles of humanitarianism more, and ultimately, because of that, we win today's debate. We're able to help a larger scale of people. We are able to benefit, even though if it's only one side, we're still able to benefit more people on that one side than opposition being able to benefit no people on both sides, right? So proud to propose.
Here, thank you for that fine speech that